June 20th, 1947. Beverly Hills, California. The night was quiet. Inside a large mansion on North Linden Drive, a man sat on a floral couch reading the evening newspaper. Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, one of the most feared gangsters in America. Outside, the street looked empty. No shouting. No engines running. Just darkness. Then the window exploded. Glass shattered across the room. Bullets tore through the living room with surgical precision. One round ripped through Siegel's face. Another shattered his eye. He collapsed instantly, dead before his body hit the floor. The gunman was never officially identified. No arrest. No witnesses. But within minutes of the murder, something strange happened 270 miles away. In Las Vegas, mob associates quietly walked into the Flamingo Hotel, the casino Siegel had built with Mafia money. They removed the managers, changed the books, and took control, which revealed the real truth. Benjamin Siegel had not simply been murdered. He had been replaced, long before Beverly Hills, before Las Vegas, before the Flamingo. Benjamin Siegel was a street kid in Brooklyn, New York. He was born February 28, 1906, in the neighborhood of Williamsburg. His parents were poor Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe. Like many families arriving in New York at the start of the 20th century, they lived in cramped tenements, surrounded by poverty, overcrowding, and violence. For young Benjamin, survival was not theoretical. It was daily life. Street gangs controlled neighborhoods. Protection rackets targeted small shopkeepers. Police presence was inconsistent and often corrupt. Siegel learned quickly that fear was a form of currency. By his early teenage years, he had already developed a reputation for explosive violence. Witnesses later recalled his sudden temper, unpredictable and terrifying. This was where he earned the nickname Bugsy, not because he was crazy, but because people believed he could become violent without warning. Yet even in these early years, Siegel possessed something unusual for a street gangster: ambition. And ambition alone rarely survives without the right partner. That partner appeared in the form of another Brooklyn teenager, Meyer Lansky. Lansky was different, quiet, methodical, coldly intelligent. Where Siegel relied on intimidation, Lansky relied on calculation. Together they formed what became known as the Bugs and Meyer Mob. Their first operations were simple: protection rackets, loan sharking, street enforcement. But the real opportunity arrived in 1920. The United States government had just passed the 18th Amendment. Alcohol was now illegal. Prohibition was supposed to eliminate crime. Instead, it created the largest black market in American history. Suddenly, the streets of New York were flooded with money. Bootlegging networks, smuggling routes, illegal bars, and every shipment needed protection. Violence became a business model. Siegel thrived in it. He was not merely a thug. He was an enforcer capable of extreme brutality when required. Within a few years, the Bugs and Meyer mob became deeply involved with the rising Italian Mafia networks forming across New York. This alliance would shape the future of organized crime in America. One name would soon dominate these negotiations: Charles "Lucky" Luciano. Luciano understood something older Mafia bosses did not. Ethnicity mattered less than profit. And men like Siegel and Lansky could deliver results. By the late 1920s, Siegel was no longer a street criminal. He had become something far more dangerous: a professional gangster operating inside the emerging structure of the National Crime Syndicate. But power inside organized crime always comes with a hidden cost. And the higher Siegel climbed, the more enemies he created. The violence that once built his reputation would soon follow him across the country, all the way to California, and eventually to Las Vegas. By the end of the 1920s, organized crime in America was changing. Old traditions were collapsing. For decades, the Mafia had been ruled by aging bosses who believed crime should remain secret, local, and strictly Italian. But a new generation saw things differently. They believed crime could be organized like a corporation, national, efficient, profitable. At the center of this transformation stood Charles "Lucky" Luciano. Luciano's vision was simple: destroy the old system and replace it with something modern. In 1931, that vision exploded into violence during what became known as the Castellammarese War. Two rival mafia factions fought for control of New York. The war left dozens dead. Bosses were assassinated. Power structures collapsed. And when the killing stopped, Luciano emerged as the architect of a new order, the National Crime Syndicate. Instead of one boss ruling everything, power would now be divided between families and criminal partners across the country. This new structure needed enforcers, men willing to carry out decisions that others would not. Benjamin Siegel became one of those men. By now, Siegel had a reputation that extended far beyond Brooklyn. He was handsome, charismatic, and terrifyingly unpredictable. Witnesses later described how he could switch from charm to violence in seconds. That combination made him useful, especially for a darker operation quietly forming inside the syndicate. A group of professional killers. Later investigators would call it Murder, Inc. The organization functioned as a contract killing service for the Mafia Commission. When someone needed to disappear, Murder, Inc. handled the problem discreetly, efficiently. Siegel was never the official leader, but he was one of its most reliable participants. Throughout the early 1930s, he took part in numerous enforcement operations, intimidation, debt collection, and, when required, executions. The exact number of killings connected to him remains uncertain. Witnesses rarely spoke, and when they did, many later disappeared. But violence alone did not explain Siegel's growing influence. Unlike many gangsters of the era, he understood image. He dressed like a Hollywood star. Tailored suits, expensive cars, perfectly combed hair. While others hid from public attention, Siegel walked directly into it. This would become his greatest strength, and eventually his greatest mistake. Because by the mid-1930s, the Mafia Commission faced a new opportunity on the opposite side of the country. A place with weak law enforcement, political corruption, and wide-open desert land. A small railroad stop in Nevada. A place few Americans had even heard of, Las Vegas. And the syndicate would send Benjamin Siegel to help build it. In 1936, Benjamin Siegel left New York. The decision was not exile, it was strategy. The Mafia Commission needed a presence on the West Coast, where gambling, bookmaking, and union rackets were expanding rapidly. California was booming with oil money, film studios, and wartime industry. Hollywood celebrities gambled heavily. Businessmen wanted quiet places to lose large amounts of cash. And unlike New York, the criminal landscape in Los Angeles was still fragmented. Opportunity. Siegel arrived with a reputation that preceded him. Tall, sharp suits, movie star looks. He quickly built relationships with actors, studio executives, and nightclub owners. He attended lavish parties and moved easily among Hollywood elites, but behind the glamour, Siegel was doing what he had always done: building rackets. Illegal gambling operations spread across Los Angeles, bookmaking networks expanded. Debt collection remained brutal. His closest ally remained Meyer Lansky, who continued managing financial operations from the East Coast. Together they represented a powerful combination: violence and calculation. But the real turning point came from Nevada. In 1931, the state had quietly legalized casino gambling in an attempt to survive the Great Depression. For years, the casinos were small and primitive, dusty roadside establishments, low ceilings, cheap tables, nothing resembling the grand gambling halls of Europe or Cuba. Siegel saw something others did not: potential. He imagined a luxury resort rising out of the desert, expensive hotels, bright neon lights, elegant gambling rooms, a place where Hollywood stars could gamble openly, a place that would transform the image of American casinos. The idea fascinated him. But the project would require enormous investment, millions of dollars, money that could only come from one place, the Mafia syndicate. And convincing them would not be easy, because Siegel was asking hardened crime bosses to invest in something unprecedented. A desert city built entirely around gambling. It sounded absurd, but they approved the funding, and that decision would change the future of Las Vegas forever. It would also seal Benjamin Siegel's fate. When the Mafia Commission approved Benjamin Siegel's proposal, they believed they were financing a casino. In reality, they were financing the future of Las Vegas. The project would be called the Flamingo. Construction began in 1945, just as World War II was ending, and America was entering a period of explosive economic growth. Soldiers were returning home. Tourism was expanding. Highways were being built across the country. Las Vegas sat directly along one of those routes. But building a luxury casino in the middle of the Nevada desert required more than ambition. It required political protection. Nevada officials had legalized gambling in 1931, but the industry remained fragile. State authorities feared federal crackdowns and negative publicity. The presence of organized crime had to remain invisible. Siegel understood this. He cultivated relationships with local politicians, business owners, and law enforcement officials. Money moved quietly through construction contracts, supply chains, and labor agreements. On the surface, the Flamingo appeared to be a legitimate hotel project. Behind the scenes, it was funded by a coalition of powerful crime families. Money flowed from New York, Chicago, and Florida. Figures connected to Meyer Lansky, Lucky Luciano's former network, and Chicago outfit boss Tony Accardo all had financial stakes in the project. But almost immediately, problems began. Construction costs exploded. Materials were scarce because of post-war shortages. Transportation costs increased. Contractors demanded higher payments. Millions of dollars disappeared into expenses that could not be fully explained. The original budget had been around $1.5 million. Soon it climbed past $4 million. For legitimate investors, this might have been a business problem. For the Mafia, it was something else entirely. Suspicion. Some bosses believed Siegel was skimming money from the project. Others believed he had simply lost control. Either possibility carried the same consequence. Inside organized crime, failure was rarely tolerated. By late 1946, whispers were spreading across the syndicate. The Flamingo was becoming a liability, and Benjamin Siegel was running out of time. By early 1947, the patience of the Mafia Commission was beginning to collapse. The Flamingo had finally opened its doors in December 1946. But the opening was a disaster. Heavy rainstorms flooded nearby roads. Wealthy gamblers canceled their reservations. The hotel itself was not even fully completed. Inside the casino, tables stood half empty. For the syndicate bosses who had invested millions, the numbers were alarming. The casino closed only 2 weeks after opening. Officially, it was described as a temporary shutdown for construction improvements. Privately, something far more serious was happening. The investors wanted answers. Reports from Las Vegas painted a troubling picture. Benjamin Siegel was living extravagantly. Expensive suits, luxury homes in Beverly Hills, lavish parties with Hollywood celebrities. Meanwhile, the Flamingo continued consuming money. Millions had already been spent, yet financial records remained unclear. The Mafia did not tolerate financial uncertainty. In their world, every dollar had an owner. And missing money usually meant one thing: someone was stealing. Siegel denied the accusations. He insisted the Flamingo would soon succeed. Once construction finished and tourism increased, the casino would begin generating massive profits. But by this stage, many syndicate leaders had already reached their conclusion. They believed Siegel had become reckless. Worse, they believed his celebrity lifestyle had made him visible. Too visible. Organized crime survived through secrecy. Siegel was appearing in newspapers, photographed at Hollywood parties alongside actors and film producers. For conservative mafia bosses, this behavior was dangerous. It invited attention from federal investigators. Even Siegel's closest ally, Meyer Lansky, faced growing pressure. Lansky had defended him repeatedly. But protection inside the syndicate was never permanent. Eventually, the commission demanded a final review of the Flamingo finances. If the numbers did not improve, a different solution would be considered. Because inside the Mafia, leadership was not permanent. Power belonged only to those who produced results. And Benjamin Siegel had begun to look like a liability. The decision about his future would soon be made quietly, behind closed doors. Far from Las Vegas, by June 1947, the decision had already been made. It was never written down, never publicly announced. Inside the Mafia Commission, such orders rarely were. But the message moved quietly through the syndicate. Benjamin Siegel had become a problem that needed to disappear. The Flamingo was finally beginning to show signs of success. Tourists were arriving. Casino revenue was improving. But for the investors, the issue was no longer the casino. It was Siegel. Too unpredictable. Too public. Too expensive. Removing him would solve multiple problems at once. It would reassure investors, restore discipline inside the organization, and ensure that Las Vegas remained under controlled management. On the evening of June 20th, 1947, Siegel was visiting the Beverly Hills home of Virginia Hill, his longtime companion. The house stood on North Linden Drive, quiet street, well-kept gardens, large windows facing the front yard. Siegel sat inside the living room reading a newspaper. He had no bodyguards, no visible security. Just after 10:45 p.m., the gunman approached from outside the house. The shots came through the window. 9 rounds fired from a .30 caliber M1 carbine rifle. The bullets shattered the glass and tore across the room. One round struck Siegel in the head, destroying his left eye. Others struck his chest and lungs. Death was immediate. The shooter vanished into the darkness. No arrests were ever made. But within minutes of the killing, the real purpose of the assassination became clear. In Las Vegas, men connected to the syndicate quietly entered the Flamingo Hotel. Management changed overnight. Control transferred instantly. The casino Benjamin Siegel had built no longer belonged to him. Benjamin Siegel's body was discovered moments after the shooting. The living room in the Beverly Hills house was covered in shattered glass and blood. Police arrived quickly, but the crime scene revealed very little. No weapon, no witnesses, no clear suspect. Officially, the murder remained unsolved. But in the world of organized crime, the message was already understood. Siegel's death had been approved at the highest level. While detectives were still examining the scene in California, events were already unfolding hundreds of miles away. Inside the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas, new managers arrived within hours. They were representatives of the same Mafia investors who had financed the casino. Bookkeepers reviewed financial records. Control of the gambling floor changed hands. The transition happened almost silently. Guests inside the casino barely noticed. For the syndicate, the operation had worked exactly as intended. The Flamingo remained open. Profits continued flowing. Only the man who had built the project was gone. In the months that followed, Las Vegas began transforming rapidly. More casinos appeared along the desert highway. More mob investors arrived. The Flamingo became the blueprint for a new model of organized crime. Large-scale casinos, corporate-style management, and hidden ownership behind legitimate businesses. Benjamin Siegel had dreamed of turning the Nevada desert into a gambling empire. In death, that dream became reality. But he would never see what it became. Because in the mathematics of organized crime, visionaries are often expendable. The bullets that killed Benjamin Bugsy Siegel did more than end a life. They marked the moment when organized crime revealed one of its oldest rules. Power is never personal. It is transactional. For years, Siegel had been useful. He was fearless when violence was required, charismatic when negotiations demanded charm, ambitious enough to imagine something no other gangster had dared to attempt: a luxury gambling empire in the Nevada desert. But organized crime does not reward vision. It rewards stability. The Mafia Commission had invested millions into the Flamingo, not because they believed in Siegel's dream, but because they believed in profit. Once the casino began working, the calculation changed. Siegel himself became the risk. His visibility attracted attention. His lifestyle raised suspicion. His spending created distrust. Inside the syndicate, loyalty rarely survives financial doubt. So the system corrected itself, quietly, efficiently. The man who imagined Las Vegas was removed from the equation. Yet the irony remains impossible to ignore. Without Benjamin Siegel, modern Las Vegas might never have existed. The Flamingo proved something revolutionary. A casino could be more than a gambling hall. It could be a destination. Hotels, entertainment, luxury, neon lights glowing in the desert night. What followed was an explosion of development. The Sands, the Riviera, the Stardust, each one built on the same foundation Siegel had created. But none of them carried his name. Because organized crime does not celebrate architects, it replaces them. And on that quiet night in Beverly Hills in 1947, Las Vegas claimed its first ghost, Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, the man who built the city, and the man the city could not afford to keep.